Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of ClearTalk. My name is Tim and I'm the Senior Sales Executive with Solutions 360. And today I'm here with Mark Demler, who is a business consultant and executive business consultant focused on business process and sales development for industry leaders. Today we're going to be focused on a common challenge that we all hear in the industry, which is software tools and ERP. Are we ready? Do we know what we're looking for? What are the challenges that are getting us to look in the first place? So, Mark, thank you for being here. Very excited to be with you here today. I've got a list of questions that I feel like would be a great way. These are common questions that I get asked a lot in the sales process. Starting right out of the gate, what initially led you to look at an ERP with Solutions 360?
Hey, Tim, it's good to be here with you. Thank you. I'm really happy to get a chance to share the story because I think we've learned a lot, had quite an adventure over the last 18 months, arriving at the conclusion we're at today. So, yes, the owner of the company that I consult to, it's Electronic Innovations, a very progressive organization in the San Francisco Bay Area, was positioning his company for growth and a generational transition. And he and I have been friends for years in consulting. I've owned my own company as well in the integration industry. So I was uniquely positioned to join him for a while, take a look at the organization and see what we could help work better. One of the things he was struggling with was the software platform he had just wasn't doing the job. He had evolved beyond the reason the platform was purchased 6, 7 years previously. It was purchased on the basis that it was a great service program, that they plugged into a great accounting program, that they plugged into a great proposal program, and then they had a whole bunch of spreadsheets running the rest of the company. Inventory was on spreadsheets, AR and AP, the 21 spreadsheets. They were manually re-entering everything over and over again. During the life cycle of a customer, you may enter all their data in 5 different programs. So he was having an incredible efficiency problem that was dragging his company down. It was keeping him from increasing sales. It was keeping him from moving into new marketplaces. And it was just making it hard to consider, how do I prepare my company for the next phase of their journey? So I identified that as one of the key needs. Is we've got to look at a platform that's going to take you to the next level. So
Got it.
that's what started the journey.
Yeah. So you had all these different systems, you were kind of stitching them together with some digital glue, but it wasn't really that full platform end to end that you were looking for, or is that?
Yes, and like most companies of this size, EI is not a big integrator, and a lot of this discussion applies to companies that don't have big internal IT resources. If you're $100 million a year integrator, you probably got guys that know and gals that know this stuff I'm talking about. But for the company that runs between 10 to 20, maybe 25 million a year, maybe you're outsourcing your network to a third party, maybe your help desk is being handled by a third party. You probably don't have a business analyst or a business systems manager at that size and scope. And that was the struggle they had. They didn't know where to go with software. They didn't have anybody running that process. So they've had different people recommend different parts and pieces to them that they kind of cobbled together. Again, I like to call it a patchwork quilt. It worked. It didn't kill the company, but it was certainly keeping them from going to the next level.
Yeah.
So the first advice I gave them is, you have identified your plan, and they very wisely had before they engaged me. The owner, who's very creative, he's also the founder. It's a sole proprietorship. He's a leader in the industry, so the guy's not a rookie. He knows his stuff, and he's a real treat to work for. That makes this role easier. He could verbalize to me exactly what the next year was going to look like, the next 3 years, the next 5 years, and that's the best advice I would give to a company considering or recognizing the need to engage in this journey. Know where you want to be in the next 5 years. A software platform must be purchased and sourced based upon your vision. You don't buy the software just to run the business. It's not like buying a screwdriver or some other tool. It's you've got to know what your needs you have to fulfill 5 years from now, and then you pick software that backs into that. Because remember, it's the key driving force of your company. It's what's going to propel your marketing and your sales. It's what's going to keep your organization streamlined, so that as you grow your company 10, 20, 30%, you're not growing your employee base 10, 20, 30%. 50%. The idea is to get the software to do the lifting so you can run your business more efficiently and have 50% more revenue with the same number of employees.
Right. So what I heard you say is you knew you had these challenges with multiple systems, a lot of manual reentry, and then the best advice you could give someone is to really have a clear vision of where we want to go and the challenges we want to solve. What were some of the key features and capabilities that you knew you needed to have in an ERP system?
Okay. Well, first thing we did, once we knew where we wanted to go, we knew growth was a big part of it, allowing us to add branches. So we needed something to handle multiple locations, multiple venues of business. The company is not only a construction company because we do gates, gate automation, fence installation. We've got backhoes, we've got excavators, we've got lift truck, bucket trucks. So you've got all these profit centers you want your software to manage. But you're also an electronics company. As an integrator, we do access control, we do incredible video, we do standard security systems. About the only thing in this space we don't do is fire. So we needed software that could handle design construction work, that could handle over-the-counter sales of parts and materials to customers. They walk in the door and buy what they need. And that can handle a very robust service campaign because we do recurring revenue service, which was a growth focus of this plan. We provide monitoring. We provide scheduled preventative maintenance on a very large scale. When you've got gates and pop-up bollards and you're doing airport protection and capital security, you've got stuff that is constantly moving. It's mechanical. So the preventative maintenance is really huge for this company. So we identified what are our specific tasks we do today. What does the software need to do to support that? And where are you going to grow those tasks? So that made the whole thing a challenge to begin with because this particular client is a very multifaceted company. It's not a big company. You're looking at 40, 45 employees. But they're a boutique operation, which makes them a real challenge to find the right software. There's great construction software out there. There's great service software, but we identified early on that they did not want to provide the IT resources to manage this patchwork quilt, that the ownership wanted a one-stop shop solution that could provide as many of these particular pieces we need: sales administration, project management, purchasing, warehousing, ARAP, and on down the list. Identify those key areas. Then we broke them down and got the subject matter experts in each of those areas, which was typically the department heads, to analyze what their needs were. It really wasn't about what I thought they should have. My role as the purchasing coordinator for the project was to administer the discussion and make sure they looked outside themselves. First thing we encourage them to do is go ahead and identify your pain points. The programs that are working are giving you trouble. Don't dwell on that. That isn't necessarily what gets you to your destination. It solves the current problems, but let's identify those first, which we did very capably in all 9 of those key venues. We came up with a definite list. It can't do this. It needs to do that. Oh my God, make sure it handles inventory better than X. And then we identified what that is. What do you mean better? What is better than? We'd kind of start at that D level, which is where we were performing, then get up to that C plus level, which was identifying the thresholds of pain. My role was to take them to the A level. Okay, now let's look out through the windshield. How can we get things even better than we dreamed of? Not just stopping the pain, but how do we get to the point that we can flow X amount of dollars of project work through that system? And it isn't just stopping the pain, it's something that's more effective. So we talked to different industry experts, we interviewed folks that had better ideas, and we came up with a very forward-looking list of elements and tasks that we need to have in the software from each of the 9 key disciplines. We weighted those. This is worth 1 point. This is worth 0.5. This piece is really important. Cash flow is really important. So anything that contributes to getting invoiced and collected in a very timely basis, which anybody who's in the construction business knows that's a challenge because you got retention and everything else, but the software's got to support and track all that so we don't lose track of it. So that element, that piece gets weighted by 5 points. So we came up with a large blueprint template, manageable, that defined what was important and what we needed to see. And only then were we ready to talk to software companies. We recognized that even the software companies, as they did their pitches, would have more elements that we could add to this. So this was a fluid document. It was a living, breathing. It was not a cast in concrete blueprint. The very first software company we talked to said, yeah, but have you thought about this? And we all looked at each other and said, no, we didn't. So we added this to the list after we analyzed it and decided this was important. Some software companies would pitch things that weren't really relevant to our enterprise, and that's okay. But we learned a lot just from the process, and actually went back to some of the early software companies and asked them additional questions.
Yeah. So step one, you had this vision of where you wanted to go. You knew that there were some challenges, but then you took a step really into it, and you got subject matter experts throughout the company to give you feedback about what's not working. And then on top of that, you weighted where the big challenges are based on what was most important to your client. Is that right?
Yes. Along with getting folks to step outside of what they knew and learn what they didn't know, because most of the folks here had not worked in a larger enterprise. And that's kind of what I brought in, because I had been the vice president of IT for a large firm, and I started in the industry installing. So I really understood the industry soup to nuts over my career. So I was able to ask a lot of those questions because I'd been with larger enterprises that had a lot of these systems functioning well. So I could throw the, what if we do this out on the table and just sit back and let them talk about it. And sometimes they discarded it, and sometimes they felt it was something they wanted. Again, my job was to guide and referee, and I think that was a big part. If you don't have somebody like that, you may want somebody in there to be that catalyst, that referee to work with your team. That is the biggest problem I found, that smaller companies have very capable people, very gifted performers in their leadership roles, but they don't always know what they don't know. Maybe they grew up in the company and that's the only company they've ever worked for. When you're asking them to envision the future, it's a challenge. So you need somebody to kind of be a coach and move them along and help them get outside themselves and see things differently. And by the way, that's a big part of how you grow the company, because then they start to think differently about their portion of the business. It's not just software. It's an exercise in how to grow your company and how to help your leaders become better leaders. So we actually incorporated a lot of our consultation into the software process to make it something much more than just choosing software. So don't be afraid of, throwing a little cash at that, because your experience will make your entire enterprise better, not just find a software package. Because if that's all you do is you find better software, and in itself, that's really good. That's a main accomplishment. If that's all that comes out of the exercise, you've actually missed an opportunity there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If you install new software, but you don't use it right, you don't have the right culture and discipline built into it, you're not always going to get the same result that you expect without that consulting and the importance of why are we doing this. So I love that. That's a great topic. Maybe we might want to get into more detail on that alone on another time.
Yeah.
I guess moving forward,
if you do that successfully, you then have your people prepared to think into the future. And that's a very different discussion we'll have later. But how does that mentality and that culture change affect your implementation? Because when you go into implementation, you have trained your people to think beyond themselves, and they come back during implementation and start to make requests of the software provider, of the business analysts. So that piece is a really important point to touch on here, although we'll go into detail later, because that helps you qualify a software company. Are you buying a platform that comes out of the box, you plug it in and they walk away? Or are you buying a platform that can start evolving with you the day you plug it in? When you come to business analysts with your software provider with, hey, we wish it did this, or we wish it did that, does that just get delegated to the users group to be responded to in 2 or 3 years? Or do they say, yeah, we've got hours in programming, let me go ahead and set that up for you now? You will want to qualify the software providers as to their flexibility. Are you buying a canned product and what you get is what you get? or are you buying a product that gives you resources up front to help build it the way you need? And that's not a reckless process. That has to be a very disciplined process, because you don't want to distract your software company. But if you choose the right partner, you're going to get an ERP and a CRM that's going to be semi-customized to how you do business. And I got to tell you, to be able to get that going out the gate is huge compared to buying something out of the box that you've got to evolve your processes to when you plug it in. So again, that goes into how you interview your software companies.
Yeah.
Ask them for examples of how they evolve with the customer from the day they start. What resources do they provide at the point of implementation on day one when you're going through that phased implementation to support you? Oh, we give you some training. We give you 80 hours worth of training. That's probably not the answer you want to hear.
Right.
We'll put a business analyst on this and that person and 2 programmers supporting them, and they will be with you through the first 90 days. And yeah, you got 80 hours worth of training, or 200 hours or 300 hours, whatever it is. But listen carefully, because let me tell you, no matter how much you think about, about what you want and what you buy, this is a fluid process. Your desires and needs as an enterprise will start evolving the minute your people start thinking about this, and you want a partner in software that can work with that.
So for you had this vision of getting everything under a platform that worked relatively right out of the box. Of course, some configuration and customization to some extent, but really something that worked for you without having all that IT involvement in the modifications, the customizations. So as you're going through that process, were there any non-negotiables or deal breakers that you were looking for to make sure that it would work for you?
Yeah, I have to be careful exactly how to say that, because I don't want to mislead our listeners. We found things in the interview process with each company that we thought we had to have, but they couldn't do. Early on, we started disqualifying software providers because of some of these. The ability to take payments in powerful ways, simple to take credit card payments from the field. That's really important to us. We have 3 providers that couldn't do that and weren't interested in doing that. Again, it's about cash flow. If I could put a service tech in front of somebody and get a credit card payment right there for the work that was done, that's the best possible world. Several providers, surprisingly enough, were so construction oriented, all they could handle was standard billing and progress payments. They couldn't do that. So that became a deal breaker. But we softened our stance when one of the providers said, we can't today, but we'll build that customization into the deal, and together we'll find out what you need, what providers you work with, and we will customize the integration. So we softened our approach, and that was part of how we evolved. If you can do it, and you've got to write it into the agreement, so you put your money where your mouth is. If you can do it, you qualify. You get a check mark in that weighted box. So that's an example. Yes, there were hard and fast things we had to have, but if you committed to doing it and developing it as part of the integration process over 90 days, we'd give you credit for that. So yeah, you had to have solid financials. You had to be able to have us close within 10 days of the end of the month. If your processes were so arcane that we couldn't close for 2 months, that wasn't acceptable. We needed to have real-time purchasing, inventory relief, and management, because every truck is a warehouse with us. Many can't do that. And that was a deal killer. Oh yeah, when we resolve the job, all the inventory becomes accurate. Well, some of our jobs run 9 months. And that wasn't going to work, to have inventory that was 9 months old. So the real-time nature of 8 or 9 key pressure points were deal breakers for us. And that excluded several companies. Yes.
And going back to the implementation piece of it, so you figured out what your non-negotiables, your deal breakers were. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that implementation was really important and key for your team, that you had a proven process to go through. How did you weigh that implementation and evaluate not just the implementation, but the training that goes along with it?
We would ask for opportunities to sample the training. We would want, because training, of course, is important, and it isn't just initial training. It's how do we support our people when jobs transition? We hire a new person 90 days after implementation. What training is involved? Is that going to cost us for the rest of our lives? Or do we have our people trained? How does your training structure work? And in some cases, yeah, we got a video library. Just watch that and you'll be just fine. That's a disqualifier because the company had gone through that. That's a hard stop, and that just killed them. The right answer for us was, yes, we have X number of hours, and it's got to be fairly liberal to train each of your subject matter experts to retrain, a train the trainer program. And we have all the tools your people will need to retrain. We'll take you through the first 2 rounds, and we're always there if you need us to train a new employee. And here's the set rate for that. So we knew what our costs were up front, but very aggressive tools to allow our department managers to retrain and oversee their new staff was really, really important. And a library of tools, whether it's video presentations, pre-recorded of our trainings in a library that are really accessible in the language that Electronic Innovations employees understand, is a great tool to work with some hands-on mentoring. So we looked at how they structured that. And again, those that just said, yeah, we got a great video library, and there's nothing relative to how EI does business, because as I mentioned before, EI is a 3-dimensional business. It's hard to just deal with canned stuff that works for everybody else. And the training piece was very important. That was an easy disqualifier. We also would want them not just to show us how different processes work, but we'd established about 9 processes we wanted to have demonstrated in a training environment during the sales process that we could execute on a call like this. Okay, now let us drive. You've shown it to us. Let us see how intuitive this is. Let us see how the fields are described. Is there context sensitive help when I hover over a field title? Is there a way to get help at any point in time within the process if I forget? So we would want to see that in the sales process. We went through a multi-tier presentation process. First was the high level sales pitch that the companies wanted to give us. We'd go through that with everybody. We'd come back to each of them with specific questions where we saw lack, and we would screen people off based upon that. Then we would get down to the, okay, now show us again how the process works from end to end, and then let us do together. And then we would come up with additional questions and screen people off from that. We didn't want to start with a level where this is a 2-year process and everybody who pitched to us was going through the entire thing. We wanted to find the right showstoppers to skim off the lower power players as quick as we could, because we wanted to focus on the 4 or 5 end runners that absolutely looked like they were hitting the home run. And they're the ones that we spent an intense amount of time with. Weeks
and
weeks.
Real quick on that point. So, we wanted to, it sounds like you wanted to disqualify, based off of that 50,000 foot pitch that the software companies were giving you. Did the weighing come into play as well on that piece? Is that another way that you were skimming off the top?
No, and that's a great question, Tim, because we use the showstoppers to skim off the first tier. We didn't use the weighting until the very end, when we had 4 key players that we could do business with. And we got all the answers, and they were at least 80% of what we needed, because nobody was 100%. You're not going to find a single platform player that is just perfect at everything. You pick the one that has the right emphasis, and you can work with or fix the rest as you grow together. So I will be very frank. We held the numerical weighting, and I didn't even tabulate it. Nobody knew who the winner was until the end of the game. And it was like the Oscars. The envelope is, and it literally was like that. And there were all 8 of us in the room. And I ran the math, because up to that moment, I didn't know. And we projected it on the screen. And everybody said, oh, and it was very cool. And everybody was very, very happy.
Yeah. And that brings up another concept altogether. You said you did the math.
Yeah.
How important was pricing, and how did you factor in ROI for the, in this evaluation?
That's a really good point, because I did, of course, as the project and the selection manager, need to do cost justification for everything. So I'm glad you asked that. We were able to do a financial weighting based upon the numbers, and I was able to look at what roles can we skinny down, what roles, as we meet our 5-year plan, are we going to have to add more people, what roles don't we, because this software is going to be efficient in each of those disciplines. So I could literally write a return on investment based upon each of the 4 key players. This wasn't just about price shopping. We were given latitude to pick the right product for the right price, and we did not settle for the lowest price at all. I will tell you, price did not become a discussion until after we'd made a selection. We did that on purpose. We didn't want to be biased by just price. And I recognize, cash
So
is
your leadership team and yourself, you really allowed price not to blur your vision.
right.
You really focused on that vision and made sure that the software you were looking at would accomplish the key things that you
Yes.
needed. And then, and only
And
then, price
And
came.
ownership and I agreed upon that. We did not discuss price with the selection team, the SMEs, the subject matter experts that were on my team that I led. None of them ever saw the price of the product, because we didn't want them weighed by that. Ownership and I agreed, we'll hold price until the final discussion. And as the owner said, Eric says, yes, I'll want to see the price of all 4 of the key packages. So I want to know where the positioning is for the product we're going to buy. Doesn't mean I'm going to want the cheapest, because I want the one you and the team are telling me are going to do the job. He empowered this team to make that decision, and he stood behind them. And the product, again, was not the cheapest. It was the right price for the right product. And he absolutely saw that after we made our presentation to him. And he, as a businessman, he's not foolish. He's not naive. He asked the questions. Well, how much more am I going to get for this? How do we justify that? Look at these guys over here. They say they're doing these 3 things and they're 20% less. And we go through that process. He made us justify the choices and why we discriminated out the people we discriminated out. This 4-tier approach worked really well. And he likes to work that way, because he wants to come in at the end and say, I have no idea what you guys have been doing. I'm just looking at this as the business owner. I need to make sure you guys have got this, 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 and this. Now tell me why you got it under control. That's the structure he likes to work under, which is why he and I like to work well together. I'll develop all the background, prep his people with the knowledge to speak to him, to his needs, to his justification. And then he'll come in at the end and say, okay, give me the 20-minute overview about this product, and let me ask you the questions based upon the foundational information Mark has given me, and then we'll walk out of this room with a decision. And
So
that process for this firm works well. It works really well.
So you've got that visionary, the strategic player, and then you've got yourself, who's integrated, detailed, that's going to get all the facts and then rally the troops around it. So it sounds like you have like a really good power relationship there, a good partnership between you and Eric.
Yeah.
So you're
it allows him to keep focused on the strategy, which is where an owner and a CEO should be. He's looking through the windshield, not getting bogged down by the details.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of bringing in an outsider who's done this before, because as long as it's a trusted outsider, it allows him, A, to run the business day to day and not be distracted by this process, B, to be watching the strategy, and it allows him not to be micromanaging the process, yet it allows me to be sitting in as his consultant in every strategic meeting he's having, every team meeting he's having, to make sure the product we're moving towards is meeting his needs. So I'm watching him evolve the business week over week, month over month, making sure that our qualifications for the software platform are going to meet this need. He may decide he's going to veer a little bit in his strategic process. That gives me the chance to true up the weighting system to make sure that we're still going to meet his expectations. So that's another benefit of having a very enabled, trusted, and qualified outsider kind of sit in the middle of this process. That way you avoid all the office politics, the favoritism, the micromanagement, the things that can happen especially in smaller business.
Yeah.
So it's very non-judgmental and very siloed until it's ready to be broadcast. And then it's open.
So you remove all those internal biases and the politics that can happen there when you've got
Yeah.
somebody outside. Yeah. So
He's not a hands-off guy. He'd hear little murmurs from the team, and he'd say, I hear you guys, or I hear you pushed the button yesterday. You really got finance spun up. I said, yeah, we did, but we're working on it. He says, I'm not going to ask you. I know you're hearing stuff. You guys are a small company. You guys are all friends. You're all close. So I know you're not as isolated as you'd like me to think you are, but I really respect the fact you're standing back and you're letting the system work. And that's a part of the key to success. Because at this size, you've got a lot of great entrepreneurs we're talking to out there who like to be involved in their processes. And I just encourage them to meter that, because you can have both a plus and a negative impact on this process if you get involved and try to poke the bear too much. So kind of let your people or your team leader do what you've empowered them to do. And if you want to get status updates because you'd like to know what's going on, absolutely, it's your deal. You're empowered to do that. But I just will tell you how we worked best. That's all I can give you is our story.
And frankly, I talk to our implementation team all the time, and one of the things that we find in common is that the leaders that empower their teams to bring in subject matter experts during the sales process, the ERP evaluation, when they go to do the implementation, there's a level of confidence, there's a level of buy-in already there, and it just makes the implementation process so much better. And I look forward to speaking with you soon about how your implementation's going and what you're getting out of it. As far as kind of wrapping up on the ERP evaluation, I'm hearing that there's this four-prong approach. You've really got to identify the vision. What do you want? Make it very clear. Then go out to your vendors, get that 50,000-foot view, disqualify quickly. And then from that level, we want to take it, build requirements from our subject matter experts, and then weigh it as we're going through detailed demonstrations where not only is the software company providing you demos, but you're getting in there, rolling up your sleeves and testing it out. Anything else to add to your process that would be helpful for somebody going through the same process?
One tip, especially because we're talking to a lot of business owners here. You may decide at some point in time you want to finance the acquisition of software. That was something we looked at. We looked at it down the road. We decided not to, but at the point we thought, let's look at what this financing would cost to do this. When the financing company asked for information, they wanted a lot of detail on what they were buying, because software is so nebulous. What in the world are we going to finance here? The documentation from this process, just simply producing that with a 3-paragraph executive summary, they were ready to give us financing at an incredibly affordable and respectable rate. So the discipline of the process, the discipline of documenting what you do within reason, not reams of paper, I'm not around that, but to be able to justify the decisions you made, you never know where that's going to be a benefit to you. Even for getting business loans for other purposes in the company, this type of process isn't, as I said before, isn't just about buying software. It's about growing your people. It's about documenting your professionalism. It's something we use when we go out for a loan in general. Say, here's an example of how we run our company in a disciplined way. And our owner uses the package and puts it out there and said, this is a sample of how we make our decisions. That makes this company, if you're ever looking for financing, funding, or acquisition, it makes us a serious player for a fairly small company. So this type of process, if you do it with discipline and do it right, can be very helpful to you in a number of places in your business, not just the best software in town, which, by the way, we have.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be here talking about it.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
I've tried to stay agnostic in our journey, but of course, I think everybody who's on this call knows the decision we've made, and you can see why. And we can talk more about the tick boxes. And anybody who wants to chat about that, I'm happy to share that.
That would be very helpful. And if we can, we'll put a little link with your information. If that's okay with you.
Sure. Happy to talk. It's been a great journey. I've enjoyed it very much. And working with you guys has been great too. So I look forward to chatting more about it.
Yeah. And we would love to hear about how the journey's going, the implementation. But today, I feel like you've done such a great job helping integrators understand the importance of an ERP and, more importantly, evaluating the correct way so we make sure that we can bring those visions to life. So, Mark, thank you for being with us today on our ClearTalk. hope to see you in the future in future podcasts as well.
Hey, great. Thanks, Tim. And to coin an old-fashioned phrase, our whole group is raving fans. You could have any member of our SME team here, any one of the 8, and they'd be giving you the same story. You got a good bunch of fans here, so we're happy to share our story with folks and help them in their process.
So happy to hear that. And good. Right back at you. Your team has been wonderful to work with. So thank you for your partnership and your support.
Thank you. Take care now.
Take care.